What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having a good day. It's game week 44 on SORARE. We'll have a little look at how I did last week. Thankfully, we're back in the rewards, just a 1 week absence from them. I'm going to run you through my lineups and some tips for good plays that I think will happen this week. Let's not waste any time. Let's go. So just taking a quick run through from the prior game week then, unfortunately we just missed, well I say we just missed, we had a really good score, 241, but it wasn't obviously enough to cut the mustard on the free giveaway this week, unfortunately. Limited contender, a DMP from Bowl, that hurts. What hurts more is a DMP from Bowl in rare contender. We had a really good rare contender lineup, and if he'd have played in the 2 games that he had, just any minutes in particular, we're sort of looking at a rare tier 2, tier 3 potentially. If he gets 20 points here, we're looking really good. Garuba was a solid pick at an 8. Jimmy Butler went 30 above his cap for 77. Torian Prince obviously had that nuts game where he hit like 8 threes in a row. Kongwu did a Kongwu stuff of 35, so yeah, that was really close and frustrating. Red Champ, we just fell outside of the tier 3, I want to say. 240, and we finished, where was it? Oh no, we finished just inside the tier 4, my bad. But regardless, another solid week. If we'd have swapped Butler for Booker as our MVPs, this would have been 25th in the world. All these sort of things, they're all in sort of hindsight. You can only look at it that way. It's frustrating. The annoying thing with Devin Booker is he turned the ball over 7 times, which to lose 14 off his score is frustrating from it. But Jaren Jackson Jr., I knew he would be a good pick for his L10. It was too low against the Rockets. RJ Barrett put 45 up in his mid of his 3 games. Kelly Oubre did Kelly Oubre things, and Nembhard went nuts on a 50. I did think because he was playing point guard, he would see some increased usage. I didn't think it would have gone to that. That's sort of the levels that he did when he played Golden State a couple weeks back now, a couple months back now. But yeah, anyway, we're back in the rewards. A tier 5 and a tier 4. Look, they'll never set the world on fire, but like a Torian Prince this week, they do come in handy sometimes. So they're never ever to be sniffed at because you can just hold them in your gallery, and some weeks they become really good plays. Also, quick shout out before we jump into my lineups for this week. We have reached 100 members in the Swingman SORARE Society League. So if you're not in it, I will leave a link in the description. Get involved. I'll be doing some prizes come the playoff time. That was a tongue twister there. I'll be doing some prizes come the playoff time. Hopefully we might get a few other things coming in from other people. But yeah, it's free to join. Join the league down below and let's see how big we can get this. Anyway, what we're all here for, the lineups for game week 44, what I'm going to do. As ever, with common pickup, if you finish in the top 200, you win a limited card. If I finish in the top 200, I'll give this limited card away. So leave your SORARE handle in the description down below. What I want to know this week, who do you think is going to be the biggest disappointment in the playoffs? Not a team, I want a player. No negative hate in that regard. Who do you think is going to be the biggest disappointment in the playoffs? So that's what I'm intrigued. I want to see where people are thinking player-wise. Because, you know, there's a few obvious candidates that have tend to not perform in the playoffs, shall we say. But that's what I want to know. So leave your SORARE handle in the description down below. And if we finish in the common pickup in the 200, I'll give it away. Let's see the team though that's going to get us in the top 200. So after looking through some of the sort of projections and guys that I can really go off of, common pickup works in a way of that you need to make sure you have these budget options to allow you to get the big dogs in. Because realistically, you're not going to ever score it with 1 MVP and 3 guys at a 30. It just doesn't normally work that way. I really like Day'Ron Sharpe this week. If it will let me get to his performance, I'm going to have to scroll all the way down, so bear with me. Coming off the big games against Cleveland, at an L10 of 13, and on a back-to-back road trip, I do quite like the pick of the 13. Even if he sees normally these guys go in sort of hot and cold streaks, I'd be very shocked to see another 50-point game. But a 30-point game isn't out of the question from Day'Ron Sharpe. I've got a nice boost of 9% on him. And also Georges Niang. As a Sixers, I would say, if I was going to say who my team in the NBA is, I would say it's the Sixers, right? From watching the Sixers for years now, Georges Niang will come in and out in terms of, again, he'll just get hot in moments of games. When Harden is not in his team and D'Anthony Melton fills in and, you know, sort of the shift moves again in terms of the player base and who's being used in certain roles, I quite like Georges Niang as that hot streak player. The 2 games against Golden State and Phoenix, These are two games where, especially on the road, you can get hot streaks v them. If they lose their heads for a moment or confidence dips, we saw it with the Sixers against the Bulls, that they can sort of go on that relentless run right from the start, from the gate at the moment. If there's something like that's happening and someone's got a hot hand, it can very well happen. Now, you obviously need to get quite lucky for these situations to happen, and that is what happens in common pickup. But it allowed me, with Daron Sharp and Georges Niang, to get Joel Embiid, Giannis, and Tatum all in the same lineup. Giannis at 46 this week. I wish I had a rare or a limited Giannis. I'm going to have one for next year. I know I am. I'm going to have a rare one. I'm pretty confident that will be sort of my first big purchase for next season. I'm not going to pick one up now. My gallery's stacked for the playoffs as is. But Joel Embiid at 57, all right, granted that's high, but even then, he's still been getting in the 60s recently. So there's no... For Embiid, playing against the Warriors as a big man, he should feast anyway. And the Suns that won't have Kevin Durant or DeAndre Ayton, I'd be quite surprised if he doesn't beat 57 in one of these games. Giannis at 46 is too low. The only thing that will hamper Giannis will be if the Bucks are winning by so much that they'll put him on a minutes restriction, or they might just put him on a minutes restriction anyway. But I've got a feeling in the Denver game, it's like a Giannis v Jokic. They're going to want to play that game out to get some information ahead of the playoffs anyway. And then Jason Tatum is Jason Tatum. So yeah, leave your SORARE handle in the comments down below, and if we win, I'll give the card away. This week, I was really, really stumped on my limited contender lineups, and going through it, I'm looking at it and I'm not really loving it, if I'm being completely honest with you. I've got Chris Boucher in at 16. I think he's a bit too low for him. He's been seeing a bit of an uptick recently in terms of coming off the bench for the Raptors in general. He can have these games where he goes really, really quiet, but also there is scope for him to get in the 30s and have a monster performance. At 16, especially with Detroit and Washington, I'll take the gamble for a contender lineup. I don't like playing Spurs players in general that aren't called Jeremy Sohan, and he's projected to do really well every week, and he never really cuts the mustard. 22 this week is not bad. He can easily get in the 30s, especially against the Washington Wizards or the Celtics, but I don't love the pick again. Jordan Poole, another one. He fits this lineup, but at 26, he's not been exactly great. The Warriors themselves haven't been on great form recently in general. But as you can see, they're so stagnated, the scores. If you look earlier in the season, he'd have sort of these games where he was getting in the 30s, the 40s, even in the 50s and close to it. So Jordan Poole has the talent to do one of these games, but I don't know. It just of what the eye test I'm seeing right now, it's not filling me with too much confidence. Juan Toscano-Anderson, he's a guy at the minute that's been getting good minutes in the rotation, but just doing nothing with it. It's sort of what Bol Bol was doing a couple of weeks back. Look, an L10 of 8 with 2 games in a back-to-back. I'm going to run the risk in this contender lineup because at the moment I'm taking a risk on Boucher and Trey Jones and arguably Jordan Poole anyway. So this is just a risky lineup. And the only guy that isn't is Nikola Vucevic, because at 37, I think that's quite low. And especially against Portland and LA, if Anthony Davis sits this LA game, Vucevic could get 70. There's just no scope for him. So at 9.5%, I'll ride it. There is a chance he gets 60, and if these guys all get 20, I might scrape the tier 4, tier 5. I don't love this lineup, but I think for me, it's what I'll do this week. We'll go for limited champion next. Now, again, this one was... The way in which my L10s have sort of lined up for this week has not been perfect, I'd say. I haven't got any sort of low-end guys because they've been doing so well recently. Their L10s have started to creep up, and they're now all in that 20 mark, which makes them a bit awkward to play alongside other like second-tier MVPs, like a Booker I've got in this lineup. Joel Embiid is my guy for the reasons I've said before in common. Against the Warriors and the Phoenix and the Suns, there's no reason he can't smash 57. Devin Booker, I've picked over Ja Morant and De'Aaron Fox primarily because, one, I think Ja Morant's still in that sort of awkward stage. I think in that away trip, they might manage him a bit. The Rockets game, there is a lot of scope for him to go nuts, but I still think he's going to come off the bench just for a few more games. And as such, the Suns are really in a push now. Devin Booker's been doing really well recently. 47 is a lot for him against the Kings and the Sixers, but I'm going to roll with him. I could easily play, if you've got De'Aaron Fox, I think he's really good this week. This game against the Jazz, I think De'Aaron Fox will smash it. But it just allowed me then to do this sort of thing. Lou Dort, I don't know what he's projecting. I just like the matchup against the Lakers and the Trailblazers. I think the OKC Thunder are this sort of like scrappy team that people are thinking are going to go for to just tank, and they're not doing that this year. I know SGA is having his minutes restricted, and well, not restricted, but monitored. And he's playing about half an hour, and then they're sort of being a bit funny with him. But I mean, there was talk I saw of Lou Dort for Defensive Player of the Year. I'm going to scrap that. That's not happening. In these two matchups here, there is scope for him to sort of get some good points, a lot of steals, a few rebounds, a couple of blocks. So I'm going to take the gamble. I know it's not what the projection says, but it's sort of I'm going to think about it and go with this instead. Jared Vanderbilt, primarily because it's OKC in Chicago. I quite like this matchup for a big. Also, there's 2 games back-to-back. I don't know if AD is going to play both of them. I'd be very, very surprised, even though they were like announcing it as if it was some shock news that he's going to play the final back-to-back of the season. Not that he should be doing that anyway. For 21, there's scope that he can get in these 30s and 40 games. I've got to hope that he'll do this. Against the Rockets and the Warriors, teams that struggle against big men, this happened. I would like to think against Chicago, this could also happen, especially if AD sits it. And then my last guy is DeAnthony Melton, primarily because he's coming off of 3 of the best games he's ever had. Also, this would be a big if James Harden misses these 2 games or one of these games in general, because that is what affects DeAnthony Melton's role in this Sixers team the most. If I see that James Harden is back, I might just swap him out for Tobias Harris, but I'll wait and see. If we get some other news that comes about, I might change Lou Dort down and bump up DeAnthony to Franz or something like that. But for right now, I'd go DeAnthony Melton. Again, I don't love this team. I don't think it's going to massively smash it. I don't think I'm going to win this week. But there is scope that I get a sort of a tier 4, tier 5. And you know what? It's just chipping away at your gallery. It's accruing. It's all for next season as well. And you never know, with these tier 4, tier 5, sometimes they come in handy for these random game weeks towards the end of the season, where teams start to sort of change their lineups up and preserve guys ready for the playoffs. Limited Underdog is back as well. It's one of my favorite competitions that we get, but because we don't get it all the time, I don't want to go out and look and scout and buy for guys, because I just don't want to. I don't see the point in it for those 2-week schedules. If they're there and I have them, I'll play them. For example, this week I'm playing Bol, and as we know, he's the most hated man in our teams for this week at the moment. I don't think he's going to see any minutes against the Nets, but he lets me play Sam Hauser, Trey Mann, and Terrence Mann. And you never know, Buddy Boheim might see some other minutes like he did the other week. But because it's not a permanent fixture in the slate, I don't look to go and make a massive gallery. And I'd also suspect that 3,000 of these here, I'd suspect at least 60% will be throwaway teams of guys that aren't filled with 5 people that are low L10s that play. There'll be a lot of people that just don't see minutes and they're just throwing them in the lineup. Right then, the rare lineups. Rare Contender we will start with. Now, Taurean Prince was the sort of big one from last week. He had an L10 of 8 or 12 or whatever it was, and he got 55 because of that nuts game that he had starting over Anthony Edwards. Do I think he can get another 8 threes in a row? No. Do I think he can outscore 13? Yes. It does harper on if Anthony Edwards misses this game or not, though. That's the one thing I will say. If he's back for the Golden State Warriors game, I would still expect him to outscore 13, but then there is scope that obviously he'll see a lot less minutes and he won't be in the rotation as much. For now, I'll roll with this. This also depends on Gary Trent Jr. I've got him up at 19% now. He's gotten 2 nice games against Detroit and the Wizards for what I would like to see in his sort of caliber of player as that kind of guard. The issue is he's questionable. If he's not going to play, I will swap him out for a Kongwu. I don't think I've got a guy at 17. I don't. Which then might mean I might swap Caruso out for Taurean Prince, but Caruso's been famed for letting me down on lineups anyway. Trendon Watford I really like at 23, especially against Chicago and OKC. In this sort of matchup as well, he's been getting nut scores recently because he's like a playmaking big, and in these 2 games, Vucevic will play 0 defense on him anyway. If this happens, I really like this as a pick. Andrew Nembhard at 23. It all depends if he's still playing in that point guard role, where he came off his 50-point game against the Raptors for me. Again, this is very, very dependent on people being out and him slotting into that position. But I like these 2 fixtures, especially his defensive attributes on Trae Young. I'd really like to see that because I think he can get quite a few steals. But Andrew Nembhard is a player that needs to start hot. If he doesn't start well in the first quarter, you're not going to get a big score out of him. It's as simple as that. And then last but not least is Marcus Smart. At 25, this is a much more sort of palatable L10 that you can accept for him. In a few weeks gone by, he was in the 30s and he was not putting up anywhere near the scores. Now he's in the 30s. 37s, and at 25 against Indiana and against the Spurs, these are very good scores that you would expect to see. So yeah, this lineup is all dependent on Taurean Prince and Gary Trent Jr. being healthy. If not, I'll jig it about a bit and we'll see what we can do. There is scope that I might play a Kendrick Nunn and really go for, like, if I go for Kendrick Nunn here, and then that allows me to bump up to a Markel Fultz, because I think Kelly Oubre is out injured, or Jeremy Grant is also injured. And I would do this because I do like Fultz against Brooklyn for this week. I think the Magic will beat Brooklyn, which is nuts to say from the start of the season. But I don't love Kendrick Nunn, even though he started to see minutes in the rotation. 5 is very low. That's the only thing. So if someone sits, then it's a good gamble as a play this week. But for now, I'll leave it as it was. Rare Champione then. Devin Booker as the MVP, 2 games. It's just one of these guys where it depends on him. If he turns the ball over 700 times like he did the other night, then it's going to be very tough. But there is scope for Devin Booker to get in the 60s, and that's what you want from an MVP. Jaren Jackson Jr., again, that game against the Rockets and also against Atlanta, you can see him outperforming 38. It's now on the uptick. He was 33 last week, but there is scope for him to get a 40s and a 50s. And if Ja Morant's back, that should help his score as well, because, you know, those two bounce off each other. Drew Holiday at 35. It's a bit of an interesting one. He's been scoring really bad recently, I'd say, for him, but at 35, it's a lot more manageable than he was when he was in the 40s. Do I think he can outscore this? It's close. I like the game against the Jazz. I don't particularly love it against Denver, but who knows with SORARE. It then allows me, if I play Usman Garuba, who at 8 again is being a solid option off the bench for the Rockets, I quite like that there is scope for him to double his L10. And that also means that I can play Mikal Bridges at 39 against Miami and Orlando. He hasn't missed a game in like 300 of them or whatever it was the stat was on Twitter, so I can't wait to see that he now misses one of these back-to-backs, but we'll take the gamble with him. I quite like the game against the Heat for him. I don't particularly like the game against the Magic. And then last but not least, it's Rare All Offense. Another one where it basically, I think the idea on this one is that it just removes the idea that you can turn the ball over. Points, assists, rebounds, 3-pointers, double-doubles, triple-doubles. Yeah, so you don't get steals, you don't get blocks, but you also lose the turnover scoring. For this case, Kevin Knox is a guy that I'm using to allow me to play 4 sort of bigger guys. He's jumped into the rotation from out of nowhere, I'd say, but this also seems to be what the Blazers are going to be doing now, that they're going to shut Damian Lillard down in a few games' time, swap their lineups about. You'll see a shift in rotation. At 5, he's really, really strong, especially if he gets 8-17. He's in that 24 bracket. If he plays against Chicago or OKC, there's scope I might put him in my rare contender and swap him out for someone else, but for now, he fits in this lineup to allow me to play the Jimmy Butler, the Jaylen Brown. Anthony Edwards is a doubt with if he's going to play in this Warriors game. So again, like the Taurean Prince stuff, if he plays, I'll probably take Anthony Edwards out of this lineup and then move Kevin Knox into the other one and jig some guys about. And then Aaron Gordon is another guy against the Bucks. It's not the best ones, but he can get in the 30s, and I'd take that for this week. The Rare All Offense, though, does only pay 225, and this is such a stingy prize pool. It's so hard to get anywhere in this one is the only issue with them. I know there's only 700 now, but it'll be in the 2000s by the time that the lock shuts, and it's just so tough to win a prize in this one. But yeah, that's going to wrap us up. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy it, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It would help me out more than you could possibly imagine. Like the video, drop your SORARE handle in the comments down below to be with a chance if we win in common pickup. And yeah, you'll have a video on Monday for the Game Week 46 lineups, and there'll probably be a rewards video as well to come. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.